Hey everybody, this is the Oars, and we're going to be teaching you a class for the K through 5th grade today. And we're very excited to be able to share our home and be able well, right now we have one of our cats jumping on our camera lady, Jillian, and licking her face because she really wanted attention. But besides that, we're very excited to have all of you here today to share this with us. Now, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be talking about a story in the book of Genesis about Abraham when he served 3 very special guests. And these guests were not your ordinary people who come over to the house. These were actually angels and God himself in some form that appeared to Abraham and wanted to talk to him. So before we start with the story, we want to tell you what we're going to be doing. We're going to be making some bread, 3 cakes of unleavened bread, and each cake is going to be for the guests that Abraham had. Now, he probably made a lot more bread than that. We don't know exactly the measure, but we're told 3 seahs of flour, which could have been a very large amount of bread and could have fed the whole household, but we're not going to make that much bread today.
No.
We're just going to make enough for 3 round cakes of unleavened bread, which would have been something that they made very quickly and had on hand to make for guests in Abraham's time. And the people, the pilgrims who would move about and then have guests come to their house when they passed by, they would make cakes very quickly. So we're going to give you the ingredients list, and after we give you the ingredients list, if you'd like, you can pause and go ahead and get those from your kitchen. Now, if you don't have flour, if you can't make that, you can always substitute something else. You can, if you have crackers on hand, if you have bread, but this is to actually make bread from scratch. And it's actually taking from Casey Golke's recipe that was put online a while back, and we're going to use that for the bread today. So
I printed out the last page of the bulletin, not the bulletin that we received this week, but last week, that has Casey's recipe for communion bread. The first ingredients is 1 cup of whole wheat flour. But first, what you need to do is, you as a cook, you need to put on your favorite apron. Go ahead and stand up, JC. Show them your favorite apron. Yes, in case y'all are wondering, that is my favorite apron that I'm letting JC borrow. And so the first ingredients, JC, is 1 cup of whole wheat flour. Now, we don't have whole wheat flour. We have all-purpose flour, which will be just fine. So JC, go ahead and get a cup of that and put it in the bowl. You can level it off. The good thing about baking this bread is that you don't necessarily have to be exact. If it's a little more or a little less, it will be just fine. There you go, JC, throw it on in.
good job.
All right. And now it calls for 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Go ahead and get 2 tablespoons. I've got the tablespoons there, and I just saw the water, so I'm gonna go get a cup of water. Give me a minute. Actually, it's half a cup of water, not a full cup.
A cup of water.
Yes.
2 tablespoons.
This is a tablespoon, right?
2 tablespoons. Daddy, do you need a pour it? Are you good, JC?
I'm good.
Okay.
Jason's a good little baker and cook. She makes eggs for herself and for Joshua, sometimes even bacon every morning. And since JC usually wakes up before Joshua, she leaves a plate of bacon and eggs in the microwave for Joshua.
Without the
when he wakes
fork.
up. Without the fork, because that would be dangerous. But she always thinks about her big brother, and she loves to eat breakfast.
Can you hand me?
Breakfast is very important, kids. I know a lot of those teenagers don't like breakfast, but breakfast is a very important meal, and you should eat it whenever
Add
possible.
2 tablespoons.
Okay. So now you're going to do half a cup of water, which I got a little bit more than half a cup of water because sometimes you never know. I would just pour almost all of it, maybe a little less than all. Okay, go ahead and stop there. There you go. Now mix it up.
Now, even though the ingredients are a little bit different because they would have flour that was freshly ground and whatnot, every single day in Abraham's time, they would make bread for their household. And they had to make a lot of bread because there were probably a couple of hundred people in their household. Not just Abraham and Sarah, but all of his servants and all of the people that traveled with Abraham. And before Abraham and Lot, his nephew, separated, they had an even bigger group along with all the cattle, and people had to take care of the cattle, and people had to help with all the things that they had to do every day. And so this was a common thing. They had to make bread from scratch. They didn't have a store that they could buy bread from. They had to take care of everything themselves.
Okay, so let's take a look at what JC's got so far. That's what it looks like. Now, let's go ahead, JC. I'm just gonna scrape this off so we can like put it with the rest of the bread.
You don't want it to be left alone.
That's right. Okay, now, this says that we are gonna knead it for 5 minutes. So while we're kneading it, JC and I might take turns, then Michael can tell you some more of the story. So JC, go ahead and we actually have a silicone mat here, so it's not gonna stick to it. But JC, get a little bit of flour and sprinkle on it. That's gonna, there you go. Spread it out a little bit. Good job. Okay, so now
I've seen y'all do this sometimes.
Yep, you have. So go ahead and dump it out, and I'll set my timer because, good gracious, we don't want to do more than that.
We hope you're washing your hands too, because that's very
important. Wash your hands
important.
beforehand. Haha. Okay, JC, so you know how to knead? And you can even use, if you need to get your, if you need to get some flour on your hands, you can do that too.
Probably need to do
You don't want sticky hands when you're kneading dough.
No, put your hands out in front. There you go. There you
It's
go.
like if you're putting hand sanitizer on, but with flour.
And what you want to do too is that whenever you knead it, hold on, let me show you. You're going to go like this, and then you're going to kind of push it down with your knuckles. You're going to do like that. So then you can go one way for a while, then you can fold it in half, and you can go the other way for a while.
Or you can just go like simultaneously.
Yeah, so you go ahead. Now push it with your, and push it with your knuckles, because your knuckles are strong. There you go. Keep going.
All right.
Just keep going.
Look
All
at
right.
that.
We got 4 minutes and 15 seconds
4
left.
minutes and 15 seconds. That gives me a little time. So, parents, if you have your Bibles, you can turn to Genesis chapter 18. Now, as JC is kneading the dough, we're going to tell a little bit about the story of Abraham and Sarah when they were by the terebinth trees of Mamre. And these terebinth trees provided a lot of shade and shelter for people in the heat of the day. And it was such a warm day during that day that Abraham was sitting at the tent door when it was really hot. And while he was sitting there, it says that the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees. God just showed up. And we know that God and Abraham were friends. God considered Abraham a friend. And he talked to him in some form. We know that no one's ever seen God before, but God appeared to him in some form and talked to him. So he lifted his eyes and looked, we're told in verse 2 of chapter 18. And behold, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the ground. So he just went straight down on the ground.
So he must have known, like, that they...
He knew something was up. Although, we know that Bedouin hospitality, and they were the Bedouin people who would travel from place to place, they were known for their hospitality. And hospitality is an interesting word. It basically means someone who is kind to strangers. And they would take care of anybody who came by. They were that kind of people.
That is a big act of service, I feel like. Hospitality is a big thing that I think that we're missing right now because we're not able to really be hospitable for people or for strangers, specifically in our homes.
That's right.
We have to keep that social distancing thing. Get down.
Our kitty really wants to know what's going on right now.
She wants to eat this bread.
It's going to be that good.
That's right.
And so when he sees these 3 men, he ran from the tent door and said, "My Lord, if I have now found favor in your sight, do not pass on by your servant. Please let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree." Why? Because it was a hot day. "And I will bring a morsel of bread that you may refresh your hearts." Isn't that an interesting phrase?
That is interesting.
You may refresh your hearts. After that, you may pass by inasmuch as you have come to your servant. So he was showing honor to these 3 men, and he was showing honor to the Lord when he came by to visit. Now, Abraham goes to Sarah. Now, Sarah's the head of the household. That was a big job. She had to make sure that everything ran smoothly in the household. and she was the queen of the castle. She took care of everything. And back in that day, the matriarch or the mom, she did just about everything. And really, without her, the whole household would fall apart. And I think in our household, that's probably the case too. If Loretta didn't do what she did, I think our household would fall apart. You're doing great on that kneading.
We have a good team. She's got 50 seconds left.
Yeah, and you got to really knead it well so that it's gonna rise well once.
It doesn't rise though.
Or not rise. Well,
Yeah,
see,
it
this is
doesn't.
how much I know about bread.
Because it's unleavened bread.
It's unleavened bread,
Which means it doesn't have a leavening agent, which leavening means to rise, right?
which makes the big bread.
Right.
You said the flat bread.
Right, so this is flat
Like,
bread.
think of cake. It has
Yeah.
leaven in it, and it can
Yes.
rise.
That's
Yeah.
right.
But this bread won't really rise, but it'll still cook.
It might
It will
poof a
cook.
little.
Yeah.
It's going to get a little poofy. And so it was important. And they didn't. The reason that they cooked unleavened bread here is that they didn't have time to wait for it to rise because they had to get something for their guests to eat right away. And so Abraham hurried into the tent. Now this tent, it's probably had at least 2 layers. It had an outer layer and an inner layer. And in the outer layer of the tent, you had sort of a meeting place, a meeting area. And in the inner part, it was separated between the men and the women so that the women could and the children could have some privacy.
Okay.
And so they had that ability to kind of come in and out and do those things.
Hold on 1 minute. We're going to take, because it said that he made 3 cakes,
3
right?
cakes.
So we're just going to divide this with our little spoon here.
Well, he didn't necessarily make 3 cakes, but there were 3
Oh, there were 3.
that
So
he
we're
was
making
serving.
3 cakes for the 3 people.
That's
so,
right, for the 3 people.
So we can just...
The 2
It's
angels
not
and the Lord.
multiplying, but it's dividing.
There you go.
That's
So we're
very
just
good.
going to...
Homeschooling
roll
is
'em.
doing good, right?
Yes.
Just going to roll them up into a ball. And then you can take our little handy dandy roller right here, our pizza roller outer. You can make... It says on the recipe 1/8 of an inch thick.
But we don't.
So you can, you can do it however thick you want to. Another thing that I do too, and I don't know if it's just out of like habit, but I take a fork and I poke holes in it, which I forgot a fork. Will you go grab a fork?
I will go grab a fork.
Okay, so we're doing this with this one. JC, what do you think? Is that one good?
That looks good.
Okay, so it's not a perfect circle. It's okay. I don't make perfect circles. Then I've got it over here on my parchment lined paper. If you do not have parchment paper, it is an amazing thing to own because it makes it to where things don't stick to
this?
your pan. It makes it way easier. Yep, just poke little holes in it like that too. That way too, it doesn't get, you know, sometimes whenever you do pie crust too, like air gets in it and so it starts making this bubble and you have to pop the bubble. Well, this makes it to where if there are any air bubbles, they'll just come out. It won't rise up and look
I'm
weird.
sorry, I'm just like
No, you're fine.
hovering over
That's
it.
kind of
You're
what the
good.
little
You're
holes
good.
are
We
with
can-
crackers too, right?
Yes, I think so.
Ah.
We can slide it that way, baby.
Yeah.
Now, in this day and age, their cakes would have been much thicker, but we're not going to do that because that would be hard for us to
Right.
do.
We're going to use this for our communion bread for tomorrow.
Theirs would be about the size of a
Watch out,
finger,
Jason.
the width of a finger, and so that's pretty
Pretty thick.
thick bread.
That's
but
like non-bread. No,
Well,
that's, yeah.
even almost bigger than that. But
Yeah.
but
Like
these were this
actual
was
bread.
part of a meal. This wasn't just something we do for communion or for a
Right.
snack. This was a real meal, so they were pretty sizable cakes.
Ah.
And so Abraham, when he's making this, says, "Quickly make ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it and make cakes," which is what we're doing now. And Abraham ran to the herd. This is his herd of cattle. Took a tender and good calf, gave it to a young man, and he hastened to prepare it. So they even made a meal
Just
of
from-
roast
I like-
meat, of roast beef, or whatever it might have been. And so he took butter and milk and the calf which he prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree as they ate. And so this was just a nice afternoon. They're right by the tent. There's a terebinth tree. It's a big tree that can give you a lot of shade. And they're just eating this meal right by the terebinth tree. And they're going to eat the cake, and they're going to eat the fattened calf, the one of their best calves. And they're going to have milk and butter. And we'll get the milk and butter out a little bit later.
Do that one. You want me to
So
do it or
we're
you-
doing the last cake right now and getting it ready so that it can go into the oven. Now, Loretta, what temperature do you usually use?
The oven is at 350 and it's supposed to go for 20 minutes, I believe. Let me look.
20 minutes.
350 for 20 minutes.
Because you want the bread to be crispy, not doughy.
I mean, yeah. Some people like doughy bread, and that's cool too.
Yeah.
And sometimes it will be more or less. Sometimes we'll start smelling it before it's
Yeah.
actually ready. So you kind of maybe want a little brown around the outside. We tried to do them as close to the same thickness as possible, because if you get one too thin, like those areas right there that are thinner, those are going to get done faster than the thicker parts. So.
Yeah, because one part would probably have to have longer in the oven, and the other might burn.
That's true. So you want to get it before it burns. So if this one cooks faster, we can always take it out before the others too. All right, and I'll go stick it in the oven.
And what's amazing is, even though this was thousands of years ago, we're making the bread in a very similar way than they made it back then. Now, they had something a little bit different. They had a clay oven that they used. And they also had these coals, these hot coals, and they throw a little bit of ash on the bread as it cooked. And these hot coals would cook it really fast. And again, it was all about speed, JC, because if these guys were on a trip, they couldn't stay for that long. And so they had to make a meal super fast. And so it was barbecuing, it was bread, it was milk, it was butter, and all of that had to be ready to go in a very short amount of time. And Abraham wanted to make sure that his guests were treated with the utmost respect. So we can't get out right now. We can't leave our houses. But how can we show hospitality to people in other ways right now? How can we show kindness to people we don't know?
So we could donate money
Yeah.
to Community Link.
Yep, that's a good
Community
one.
Link Mission in Saginaw.
Mm-hmm.
We could help our local food pantry and give them something so that they can feed other people. What else can we do to show hospitality?
What did you do for one of your outreach challenges for LTC? What did you write?
I wrote letters to the
To some of the widows?
to some of the widows.
Mm-hmm.
We can write
And,
letters.
Yeah.
What else can you do? What else do we have?
We could call people
Mm-hmm.
and we could tell them, like, how are you doing? Is everything doing well? And stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
That's good.
And, you know, during this time, I think people really need to be kind to each other and to show kindness to people we don't know, especially when we don't get to be around people or see people. It's interesting because when I was walking in the park, I noticed that some people were kind of scared to talk to you, but some people, it's like they hadn't gotten to talk to anybody. So they really said hi and really waved and everything else. And how do you think, JC, how do you think you would feel? And y'all can talk about this as a family. How would you feel if God came to your house?
That would be really amazing, but I would be also kind of scared.
Yeah.
It would be really, really amazing.
You know what was neat about Abraham is, even though I'm sure he was a little scared, yeah, Abraham really loved being close to God. And he loved talking to God and praying to God. God's probably not going to show up at our house with two angels to talk to us. But how do we talk to God?
We could pray to him.
We could pray to him.
We could sing.
We could sing. We talk to God when we sing. And that's very important because God needs to know how we feel. He wants to hear how we feel. And even though Abraham couldn't see God, even though God was appearing as a man at that time, we know that anytime we talk to God, he hears us and he listens to our prayers.
You don't always have to see to believe it, but some people have to.
Well, yeah, some people they want to see something.
They want proof.
They want proof, but part of that is that when we trust in God, we see God's power at work. We see God doing things, and God made a very special promise to Abraham after this. He promised that he would give him a son, even though Abraham was way too old to have a son. And so,
Wasn't it Sarah that laughed?
and yes, and this story a little bit later, Sarah actually laughs because she's overhearing what God is saying to the men, and because she's in her little part of the tent, right, and where the women were and the children were, and she was kind of listening in, and then she heard that she was going to get pregnant, and she was pretty old too. She was probably in her 70s, 80s.
Yeah,
And
maybe 90s.
Close to it. I mean, that they were definitely way too old to have a baby. And so she laughed. And then the Lord said, "You laughed." And she said, "No, I didn't." He said, "But you did." And they kind of had this back and forth, But she believed too. And that's the thing, is that Abraham and Sarah both believed God, and they believed the promises. But I think one of the special things about Abraham and Sarah is that they really did show kindness to others, and that's something that God wants us to do.
Like, the other day I made cupcakes for my friends, and I gave them to some of my friends because I know we're going through some hard times, and I just wanted to, to help others too.
Yeah, and there's a lot, y'all can think of some creative ways to be kind to others and to show kindness to each other during this time. Even if we can't see each other physically, we can let people know that we care about them and that God loves them and cares about them. And when we do that, then we make God very happy. That's what God wants for us. And so y'all can keep reading in Genesis 18 as a family if you want. You can read about what the Lord is going to say in verse 10. "I will certainly return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah your wife shall have a son." And that's when Sarah heard, and you can continue and read. The Lord said in verse 13, the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh? Why do you think this is funny? I'm telling you what I'm going to do for you." And she's laughing, and she said, "I didn't laugh." So it's kind of a funny story. But at the same time, God was blessing Abraham. He was saying, "Abraham, I'm going to give you a child. And through your seed," now he wasn't just talking about Isaac, which would be Abraham and Sarah's son, which means laughter, by the way.
Yeah, I was about to say that, but then I was going to wait for you to stop talking.
Oh, that's hard sometimes, isn't it? I do talk a lot, don't I, JC?
No, I talk more than you, probably.
You think so? So it wasn't just the promise about Isaac. God told Abraham, "Through your seed, all nations shall be blessed." And actually, he was talking about Jesus. And someday Jesus would bless every nation when he rose from the dead. And of course, this Sunday is Easter. And a lot of people talk about the resurrection of Jesus and the celebration of Jesus. Of course, we do that every Sunday, but especially this Sunday, we talk about when Jesus was raised from the dead. And so God gave Abraham this promise so long ago. And his promise that he made to Abraham, JC, is still being fulfilled today. God is still blessing every nation through Jesus. And so isn't it funny that it all started with a meal? What's so funny to you?
Making faces.
Well, she does make faces.
We
Come on,
still have
lady.
about 12 minutes for that to bake, so we could probably.
Yeah, we can pause. We're going to pause and let the bread finish, and we'll come back when it's done, and we'll bring out all of the stuff that Abraham would have served, except for the beef.
Yes.
Where's the beef? We don't have any calf to
Slaughter.
cook.
I feel
slaughter and
bad
cook.
for the calf.
So we'll go ahead and pause, and then we'll be right back with you. All right, we're back, and our bread is done. Now, you can leave it a little longer. Ours didn't get really brown, but it's
It's
ready.
done. Yeah.
It's finished. So we're going to just give each person a cake. Now, it's a little hot, so be careful. That's why we've got the napkins. And we brought a few things that they might have used. First of all, they had butter. And there ain't nothing better than a little
They
butter
probably
with
didn't have
bread.
butter knives, but you know what? I don't even care.
I'm sure they had some kind of utensil that they used. And then also sometimes they would use honey. And
Do you want some
it
of
was
this
just
butter,
it
Casey?
just depended
I'm just gonna
on
wait for this
if
to
they
cool
had
and
some
turn it.
honey around. Of course, they'd have to get them straight from a honeycomb. and sometimes they would
This
find
is
that
this is unfiltered
here or
honey.
there. Yeah, that's raw, unfiltered honey, so that's kind of like the honey that they would have back then. And then they also had some milk to drink. So we've got our cup of milk here.
But
And they did have some steak or beef, but we didn't have any with us. Of course, you could always add to that if you want to make it really authentic, but this is pretty much what they had. And so I'm going to get a little salt up. Sometimes they would have salt, but there wasn't salt in the recipe, so I'm just going to pour a little bit of
I
salt.
don't want. You sure she wants salt?
You want salt, JC?
sure.
All right, well, there you go.
I mean,
I
this
just
is salted
assumed.
butter,
So,
so
and then we're going to put a little bit of honey because I like some honey on mine.
Legit.
hard.
And I'm going to try a
Are you
bite
gonna
of
have the whole
mine.
thing?
I just took a bite of it.
Yeah, just took a bite.
I just broke some off. What do you want to?
Mmm.
I'm trying to break it off.
It's not that hard. Just break it off with your hands, babe.
It's hot.
Can we do it?
Yes, ma'am.
There you go. You get a bite.
Hot.
That's some good bread right
This?
there.
That's just making it
bad.
even
Good
hotter.
cakes.
Some good cakes.
Want to try a bite?
I can try a bite of mine.
You sure?
Ah! Why not? That's good.
You can let it cool if you
Want more?
want to. You don't have to
No,
eat
ma'am.
it right out of the oven. But I don't think there's anything better than that.
Pretty
Well,
good.
that's about all the time we've got. You guys go ahead and finish reading Genesis 18. I hope that y'all have enjoyed this time. Hope you enjoy your cake. And remember to show hospitality to others in various ways
There we go.
while we're all stuck in our houses together.
While JC struggles to eat bread.
Yeah, while JC struggles to eat bread. All
We
right.
love you guys. We miss you.
Love y'all. Take care.